All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our panel discussion on what are your skills worth, how to set your rates and get paid. I'm Brandy Price. I'm the course director of music retail and distribution here at Full Sail in the Music Business Program. So we are excited to have with us today a group of highly experienced professionals from the music industry, and they are going to be sharing with you their insights on the challenges and opportunities in setting your rates, paying taxes, and invoicing your clients in terms of, you being entrepreneurs, freelancers, independent contractors in your industry. So I would like to go ahead and welcome our panelists. First, we have Tom Todia, Senior Sound Designer at Electronic Arts and co-founder of Engine Audio. All right, next we have Brandon Blackwell, CEO and founder of Blackwell Productions, front of house, monitor and broadcast mixer, award-winning author. Next we have Mark Kilborn, senior lead audio designer of Certain Affinity. And finally, Fernando Delgado, production sound mixer and owner of Stickman Sound. So we're going to explore their experiences, their strategies, and even some best practices for, again, freelancers, entrepreneurs, contractors, to earn what you're worth. So please join me now in just giving a warm welcome to our distinguished panelists. Thank you for joining us. All right, so first question, Tom. Can you share your experience of how you set your rates and how you arrive at that figure?
No. Yes, of course. Is this a push talk? Hello?
Is it on?
Oh, I think it is on. Okay. Sorry, I'm an audio person. I shouldn't need to know, ask that. Share your experience on how you set your rates and how you arrive. I'm still trying to figure that out, and I'm not joking about that. Setting your rates as a freelancer, obviously. If we're talking about in-house work, there's a salary, there's a W-2, that's different. But when you're a contractor, you're a freelance artist, and you have to work through that, in my field, I work in game sound for video games now, and we don't really share with each other that kind of information in the industry. So I don't know what my good friend Mark gets paid on a freelance project, and vice versa. We don't have set rates in the typical sense. That makes it really confusing and hard to figure out what you should charge, because one of the initial thoughts is, I want to be competitive in the market that I'm in. How do I do that if I don't know what anyone else's rates are? What I would say right away is that the way that I figured out how to start with my rates is to figure out how much work in 1 hour I can get done and how much that hour is worth to me personally. And how do you quantify that? Well, I went to school, just like all of you, and paid my way through school. I've learned and practiced thousands of hours of what I do. I do it all the time. That intrinsically has some kind of value. The problem is, immediately what you want to do is make sure you're getting the gigs that you're looking for, so you want to come in low. That's your natural reaction, is let me be the one that's not overpriced. So how do you become not overpriced? It's almost impossible to answer this in a way that's mathematical, where this is what you should charge, this is what you should figure out. But one thing I will say is that when I started, I figured what was the job that I had before this that I made the most hourly rate at, and what was that? And I took that and I increased it by 25%. Why? Because that's just what I came up with. I don't know. I thought this is what I want to charge for this. And I spent a lot of time really worrying myself about that rate and that it would ruin relationships if it was too low, if it was too high, what should it be? The overarching guidance on this is that I've never heard of anyone in any of our businesses being rejected by a job or a contract that was interested in hiring you because you said the wrong number. So don't be afraid of the number, right? If we're working together and I ask you what your rate is and you say something that's too high, if I'm asking you what your rate is, it's probably because I believe in your work to some degree already. I want to know, I'm interested in us working together. If you set a crazy rate number that to me, I thought that's ridiculous, nobody charges that, the worst that's going to happen is I might giggle a little bit like, now, who do you think you are? We need something better than that. That's the worst. That's as ugly as it's going to be. You're big people. You can take that. No problem. A little giggle's not a big deal. I've actually never even had anyone giggle. What I will say lastly before moving on, though, is that the first couple of gigs I got, and I've told this story over and over again, the first gig that I got was a free gig in my mind. I found someone online I wanted to work with on a project, and I reached out and I spoke to him directly, and I didn't realize this person had any money at all, so I thought we were doing a free project together for no money. And then he came back to me on the phone and he said, "This is great, let's do a project. What are your rates?" I hadn't even thought of what my rates were at that moment. And I played it off and I said, "You know what, that's a great question. I'm more interested in the art though right now. Let's finish this talk, we'll talk about that later." And that gave me a buffer to try and figure out what to tell him about my rates from there. And I told him what my rate was at the time, and I was so nervous, there was a lump in my throat, because like he's gonna hate me for this. I told him what the rate was and I was like, he said, "Cool, no problem." That was it. That was the end of the discussion. The second time, the exact same thing happened to me. I doubled my rate the next time I was working with this exact same person. And he just said, "Yeah, cool, no problem." There was no negotiation at all. So what does that tell you? I was charging at the time too little, but I learned from that and kept going up and up. Long story short, no one has ever turned me away because they didn't like my rate. And I haven't even dealt with a lot of negotiation. Most of the time it's just been, "Yeah, that's fine." So you have to figure out what your time is worth, and it has to make sense to you, but don't worry about other people's rates. Do think about who you're working with in context. If you're working with an indie developer that's working out of their house on a project, they don't have Sony PlayStation money or whatever large company it is. So you have to think in that terms of context, but it's a really personal thing. Think about how much money you could make that would make you not want to quit that job, and let that be the rate that kind of starts you off.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great answer. And would anybody else like to chime in on setting rates and how your experience was, Fernando?
I'm going to contrast that a little bit. So every industry, not just ours, has scale, right? There's the low end of the industry, there's the high end of the industry, and it's really up to us to kind of figure out where exactly within the scale of that we want to live. When you guys are at the beginning of your career, I always ask myself, where's the value for me? What is the value for me to do this job, right? I've been doing this for 25 years, so today the value is the paycheck, right? But for you guys that are just getting started, the value is really in the experience. So when you get that first job, if somebody says they've got $50 for you to go and do a job, you have to ask yourself, am I going to gain more experience than the money is going to be worth? And my answer to you is, especially at the very beginning of your career, the answer is yes, right? So you're going to earn less money at the beginning of your career, but the compromise for that is the experience that you're going to gain and the people that you're going to meet while you're doing those jobs, right? And as your experience grows, as you become more familiar with your industry, as you start to specialize into whatever field it is that you're going to be moving into, you're going to meet people that are going to help you set your rates, right? You're going to have friends and colleagues, and you're going to have these conversations about, what is the standard rate? How much should I be charging? If you guys are smart, you'll get mentors that will also help guide you. I tend to tell my mentees to go high. Right? What's the worst that's going to happen if you ask for more money than they are willing to pay for that job? If they really want you, like Tom said, they're going to negotiate. They might giggle a little maybe, or they'll say, "That's a little steep for my budget. Would you take ta-ta-ta?" Right? And then it's a negotiation. And that, again, is building a skill, learning how to negotiate for your rates. But I always kind of go back to what's in it for me, right? Where is the value in this for me? And experience for all of you is really where the value is when you go out and start your careers.
I've got a quick thing I'll add to that. Just contrasting again, my rate is, it's based on, frankly, rates that I know of other people, because having been an audio director for so long, I've hired enough people that I kind of know what the rates are. And so I figured out where do I feel like I fit within that, and, I charge that. But an easy back of the napkin kind of math I've found for game sound rates, at least, is, my day rate is roughly what I expect as a salary as an in-house person plus about 40%. That's about what it works out to. And that has held fairly true throughout my career. The other thing I'll say is on the rare occasion I work on a film project, which does happen occasionally, the Motion Picture Editors Guild has published rates for union members. And even though I'm not a union member, I will go reference that and use that as my baseline and push upwards based on my experience. So if you're looking to do sound for film projects or games, that's a useful thoughts to have, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to say for me, to kind of go along with what you're saying, how you talk to your mentees. As a mentee myself, I have many mentors that I have referenced rate ideas off of my entire career. From the first tour that I did, I made very little money and did multiple jobs that, looking back on it now, I should have made triple of what my salary was. But ever since then, I always ask the question to my mentors, how much should I be charging for this? And we're talking about people that had, at that point, 10 years into their career over me, 15 years over me. And even recently, as of a couple months ago, for this new position that I'm on, I asked a mentor and a good friend, what should I charge? You know, he's in the live industry. He's a big name in the live industry as a front of house engineer, and what best not to use that resource. So I'm very much a big fan of reaching out to your network, dabbling and asking the question, and then as you get further along into your career, make sure you pass that down to the next generation. That's the only way that we can kind of keep growing as behind the scenes workers and audio engineers and, you know, whatever position you're in. It's just, we got to continue to pass that conversation and keep that conversation going. So just be open, be transparent, be vulnerable. Don't be afraid if you're making, you know, if you're on the lower side and someone says they're making higher, that's okay. Don't worry about it. You know, everyone's different. Everyone negotiates their rate differently. And for those in the live side, you know, negotiating has seemed to become a lost art. You know, your production managers get budgets and they have to hit a number. But like you said, there's nothing wrong with saying a number. I've gone a long time in my career being afraid and having anxiety to say a number. And then in this most recent, you know, this most recent position that I'm in, I actually I asked for a 50% retainer. So if anyone doesn't know what a retainer is, it's basically while I'm not working for this artist, they are paying me 50% of my salary. So when I negotiated my contract, I actually wanted 25% retainer. And then when I negotiated with them, they came back and said, we're going to give you 50% retainer. And I said, well, I just left 25% on the table. You know what I mean? So always, like you said, go high. What's the worst that can be said? No? And at the end of the day, that's okay, you know?
Yeah.
But if you go low, they'll take the lower number.
Absolutely.
Well, not always.
Okay. Most will.
I have had a couple clients when I was very first starting out. I remember I did this show for MTV called Say What Karaoke. It was my first. It was my first time doing a job as a broadcast A2, and I told them my rate. I don't remember what it was, but I remember that the person on the other end of the phone, who I never actually met in person, was like, yeah, you're working with the big dogs now. We're going to give you another $150 on top of that. And I was like, all right. But the nice thing about that is since they were being transparent with me about their budget, I was far happier to show up and do a good job for them. But also, now I knew a little bit more about what some of the people doing the bigger shows were making. And that became my asking price for a period of time.
Yeah, excellent answers. Thank you so much for all the advice. In fact, I would love to just kind of extend that a little bit more. We were talking a little bit about, you know, if you're starting out, any of you have any extra advice in terms of somebody that's starting out in your industry and setting rates as like an independent contractor, you know, just ensuring that they get compensated fairly? Do you have any little extra tips on that at all, anybody?
Yeah, I bet we all do, and I think that it's probably an extension of the last question. And the word fair there is the important part, you know, because fair is relative, and in context. The first few jobs I did in the current field that I'm in, I did completely for free. But it wasn't for free. That word free and fair, those kind of line up in a strange way. I needed the experience and I needed credits and I needed to get better at what I was doing. I knew something about it, but I wasn't ready to sell my product yet. I just wasn't good enough at it. So you can practice at home on your own or with a friend, but better to practice with other people that are doing the same thing as you fill out a group. You might not have any money in that, but you're networking, you're learning, you're advancing, and to me, that's a form of money. The skill set that I have now is based partially in some of those earliest projects that I learned from. I don't work for free anymore. That stopped a long time ago, and just like Fernando mentioned, I had a similar situation where I did a project, and the guy told me I was way undercharging. He said, "You're charging too little," which I thought was a joke, that somebody would say that, and I just took an evening to think about it, and I doubled my rate. I just doubled my income overnight with a thought, and I came back to him and I said, "Well, this is the rate." And he said, "Yeah, fine." And I was like, "Oh my God, I've been doing this wrong the whole time."
When we were talking earlier about when you offer a rate and they go, "Yeah, sounds great," take a mental note. Next time you need to ask for more. In my opinion, you want to give the person that is offering you this job a little pause. And I tend to go high on everything, and unlike Tom, I have lost jobs. People have gone another direction because they don't want to pay my rates. But I also look at that like, somebody else is going to come along and they are going to pay my rate. I'm going to work less, so my mixes are going to be better, but my income's not going to change.
Yeah.
So I don't mind passing on some work. There's other things where maybe it's an exciting project, or I've got a friend that is working on it and it's something that I really want to be involved in. So I'll go ahead and compromise so that I can, but again, there's that word compromise. It's all about where the value is for you. And I'm okay losing a gig because they don't want to pay. I actually, 9 times out of 10, I feel like I'm dodging bullets. I keep in touch with people that end up working on those projects, and 9 times out of 10, I dodged bullets.
2 quick thoughts on that. I've noticed that the clients that push for the lowest rates tend to be the biggest pain in my butt.
This is true.
Almost universally.
Absolutely.
The other thing that I want to add to what Tom said about working for free, I do agree that working for free is good. However, there is a tendency, particularly in games, to not budget for audio. So I would usually add the caveat of either A, make sure it's going to be a really good portfolio piece, or B, more realistically, if you're not getting paid, make sure you're not the only one not getting paid. Because I've seen plenty of projects where they're paying everybody, but then they suddenly don't have budget for sound, and I won't touch those projects. I wouldn't when I was younger either, because that's not fair.
So, to expand on that a little bit, I've been on a few jobs in my career where I negotiated a better rate than somebody that was working the exact same position alongside me. Or I've known of times where somebody negotiated a better rate than somebody else, and that somebody else got pissed. They were bitching and moaning that their rate wasn't right. They didn't focus on their job. And guess what? They didn't get the next call because they were so fixated on what somebody else did better than them that they didn't actually perform their job. So use that as a learning experience. So-and-so did better at negotiating. I need to play a little bit hardball next time, rather than getting upset and costing yourself a client. Because chances are, if you just shut up and really bust ass for that client, they're going to call you again. And when you ask for more money, you've already got a relationship with them. You've already done a good job with them. They're calling you back for a reason. They're going to pay you.
Yeah.
One last thing, I'm sorry, I keep interjecting, but I want to make sure I say this, and I don't know if one of the other questions is going to get us there. Whatever you set your rate as, if you give that rate to a client and they talk you down to something else, when you go to bill them, this has been really useful for me, bill them your original rate, put a discount line item.
Yes, yes, that's great
And the reason
advice.
I do
Write that
that,
one down.
everybody's nodding their head. The reason you do that is you make it clear to them that, hey, this once, I'm doing this for less because I want to work on this project, or I'm giving you a deal or whatever, but that doesn't change the fact that my rate is my rate. And they expect that when they potentially hire you in the future.
Yeah, so. I like to go a little bit further on what you just said. If you do accept to take that rate that's lower, that it's a discount for you, there is no complaining. You signed up to do that job.
Like, yo, man, I gave you a discount on this. No,
that doesn't mean that the
fly.
work is discounted. Yeah. You still have to do the job, the title that you signed up for. One other thing I like to add, and this one may come a little bit later in your career, if you're negotiating with someone and they decide to decline your offer of what you're looking for, and then they decide to come back later, yesterday's price is not today's price.
Right.
Yes.
So
Write that one down.
That actually happens a lot.
Absolutely.
When I outprice myself, I can't tell you how many times I've had clients hit me up and be like, "I'm really sorry we didn't just go with you to begin with."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And usually at that time, it's later. You now have later time to achieve what you need to get done. It's a rush. It's last minute. So unfortunately, you need to be compensated for that priority that it's now become. You know.
Yeah, and learn to be flexible, because you're talking to 4 people here who have been doing what they're doing long enough that I act very differently now with pricing and budget and rates than I did when I was starting out, entirely differently. And when you're just starting out, there's also nothing wrong with quantifying the amount of work. There's different ways to charge. I've done hourly rates. I'm more a fan of retainers personally, so when I'm working with smaller teams, I'll say this is how much money I want per month. And whatever work comes in, I cover it. That's my way of doing it. Some people are like, that's crazy, you don't have much, but it balances out for me actually quite well when I do that. Sometimes you give an offer and someone says, well, I was thinking this much. And an easy way to scale that backwards is say, okay, that's fine, you only have 70% of what's needed here. We're just gonna cut 30% of the workload out and then do full price on the 70% that you can afford, right? Because it's a really easy way for people to try and take advantage of you sometimes. I don't have $100, I have $50. Cool, you've got half of the work then. That's fine, you know, no problem there.
Yeah, I mean, we're already on this conversation, so I'm just going to extend it. Start with Mark here. So when working with clients, how do you handle situations where they actually dispute your rates or request additional work beyond your agreed upon scope?
Well, are you talking dispute the rates after we've signed a contract?
Yeah, like they just start kind of like, oh, well, you know, can't you do this little bit of extra work for me? Or it could be that they...
Well, yeah, so extra work, I'm very clear about what is the scope of each. We tend to break our work up into milestones, and that's usually for a stretch of time, like a month or 6 weeks, or maybe it'll be more like per gun if I'm doing a bunch of gun sounds for a game. But I'm very clear up front about what the scope is, and anything that goes in outside of that, you're basically paying a day rate for however long it takes me to do that stuff. As far as things that get out of control, like revisions can get out of control, I have a policy that I have a business manager who does some of this stuff for me now, and he's taught me to be a little harsher with this, which is good, because I'm too nice. But he has a revision policy he came up with. Basically, you get 2 revisions for free. After that, you start paying for them.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that.
And I have occasionally dismissed a revision fee if I feel like I'm really not hitting the mark, but usually it's changing direction.
Right.
And they need to pay for that.
Yeah. And do you talk to them about that ahead of time and like put that in the
yeah.
contract and stuff?
Yep.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's all very upfront. They know exactly what it is. They agree to it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And who else would like to talk about that? Just them trying to change
every once in a while,
things.
I'll get somebody that doesn't make, you know, if it's a show that's a little bit disorganized and we do some serious overtime. I've had a couple invoices where my overtime doubles what I was supposed to be making from the beginning, and I always play that by ear. If I really kind of got my butt kicked on a job and I'm not necessarily excited to see that group of people again, I might not give them a break at all.
Yeah.
I might be like, you really worked me. I earned every penny. You're going to pay the invoice. And that might upset somebody, and they might not call me back for the next one. But we've already learned that I'm not really too keen on working with them anyway. I have other clients that I have a long relationship with, and every once in a while, even before I send the invoice, I'll think about who it is that I'm working with and how they treated me. And if the days were really long, but I was working with some great people and I know that they're kind of tight on the budget, I might just offer them a discount or not charge them the overtime at all, just based on who they are and how I'm treated or how my crew is treated. So I tend to play those things by ear based on who it is that I'm interacting with.
It's a great answer. Brandon, would you like to?
Yeah. Gems. I don't even have much.
Really good. So
yeah.
one quick addition, because we're talking about contracts a lot. Just for a heads up, the first few years that I was working as a freelance person, I didn't have any actual contracts written up because I couldn't afford a lawyer to legally put together a contract for me now. I have an entertainment lawyer that handles our contract work now, but it costs a lot of money to have a professional contract written up. In the business that I've been in for a while, working out the deal that you make with a publisher or whoever, then a contract from them comes, and it basically comes from that side. That's been my experience with that. So if you're sitting there thinking, oh, well, how am I going to write a contract? You don't necessarily have to write a contract. If someone in your family is a lawyer and you can get free work, awesome. But other than that, don't start getting involved in deep pricing that you have to put out to make your work happen, because it's taking away from your salary. So, take that with a grain of salt. Lawyers are not cheap. Contracts are not cheap to have written either.
I would say especially when you're talking about rates and getting paid, send estimates to your clients so they have an email with, like a PDF of everything that you're charging. What I do, I don't do contracts 9 times out of 10. I just send estimates, and in my estimate, all of my terms are there. And it's very clear, I don't use a lot of words, so that it's very clear. After X amount of hours, this is how much I get paid. After X amount of days, this is how much I get paid, whatever the circumstances are. And I have my clients sign those estimates, telling me that they accept the terms of that estimate, and then all I have to do at that point is issue an invoice once the job is done.
I've most recently started to use that exact same thing. In the live world, it's kind of different. I normally get paid by day, but in that estimate or that quote that I send to clients, I put all of my job descriptions, the deliverables that I'm going to send, and like you said, get it approved. Even if you have to negotiate off of that, at least there's something in print that the client sees.
Yeah.
And hey, we talked about this, and it's open to any questions, any dialogue. In the live side, we don't really have contracts. You get deal memos sometimes, and it's usually word of mouth. Hey, can you go out for this rate? But recently in my career, over the last 3 or 4 years, I've been getting deal memos, and that's where it lays out everything that you're going to be paid, the workload, your retainer. How you're going to travel. Are you going to travel economy? Are you going to travel business class? So, most clients, they get a little shaken up when you start to talk about deal memos because they're not expecting that, but it's a way to protect yourself as, the worker, and also protect them so that they know that, what they're paying you, you're getting that work from them. So, I agree with you about, lawyers are expensive, and I have a lawyer now. He looks over everything that I sign. Just to make sure that I'm protected, not just about my salary, but, any intellectual information that from the client, you need protection in today's industry between yourself and your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Fernando, I'm going to direct this one at you first. So in terms of getting paid, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges you might have experienced, and how did you end up addressing the challenges of trying to get paid? And
So I've been around for a long time. I've been burnt many times. I've had a lot of clients that just drop off the face of the earth and don't pay their bills. I have one right now. Muse owes me some money from a job we did back for them in October. I'm really upset about it. I sent them text messages this morning as soon as I woke up. Yo, bro. What's going on with his invoice? I'm pretty confident that they're going to burn me and that I'm not going to get the money. And basically, this is how I deal with it. My time is valuable. If I have to spend a minute thinking about something that I did 6 months ago, that means that it's already devaluing the job I did for them to begin with, right? Because I'm investing more time thinking about them and chasing the money. So usually what I do is after a certain period of time, and I'm starting to get there with these guys in Muse, I'm just going to delete them from my phone. I'm going to block them. I'm going to tell everybody in the world that these people suck. And I'm going to consider that what I call stupid tax. I made a couple of mistakes when I was setting up this deal because I thought it was a reputable client. And so that just goes to show you that even established people will burn you if they have an opportunity. I did make a couple mistakes on this deal. I know exactly what I did wrong. I'm never going to make those mistakes again, so I've learned my lesson. So I don't consider it a fail, right? It's just another knot in my rope as I climb through this industry. And you know, I just eat it. I'm a big believer in cutting my losses and learning my lessons and moving on.
Wow.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that's tough. Does anybody else have anything to say? Mark, Brandon, Tom?
One that I usually put in contracts, like Tom said, often the contract comes from the client, but I insist it be added. is that the copyright of the material that I've created for them, the sound effects I've created for them, does not transfer until my invoices are paid in full.
Nice.
I'm going to start doing that. This
Nice.
is the first I've heard of this, and I'm going to start doing it.
Yeah, and not all clients like that, so I'm gonna get really antsy about it. But the reaction is, why are you antsy about that? Are you planning to
Right.
not pay me?
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Like, and I've seen a few people in the game audio world who are composers. I've seen 1 or 2 examples where they've actually gone to Steam or gone to Nintendo or Sony and had a game delisted by saying, hey, I'm issuing a copyright strike on this because they don't own the materials that are being played in that game. That's a very nuclear option, and you're not going to work with that client again, but, I mean,
They're not going to pay you anyway. You're not going to work for them
Right.
anyway.
Exactly.
So I don't care about that.
Yeah.
Not losing anything.
And a quick tag just to the end of that, because I know I've gone through this so many times in the way that I feel when I'm communicating with somebody about money, especially early in my career as a freelancer. This was a huge one. The uncomfort that you feel talking to someone else about money, for me, was overwhelming. I love doing the work. I don't like talking about money. I just like getting the money. But negotiating it was wildly uncomfortable for me. One thing to keep in mind, this took me years to get to in our business, is that I'm not asking Brandon to open his wallet and give me his money that he needs for his family. This is a budget at a company that we're talking about. You're not taking it out of their pocket. This budget was set aside to make sure this thing gets made, and they're going to make a lot of profit on it probably. So remember that. It's one thing when you borrow money from a friend or something, or a family member, like, oh, it's emotional. This is not emotional, and don't let it feel that way at all. These people need you, and they need the work done, and they have money to do it. They're not doing you a favor by paying you what you deserve for that project, and it's not coming out of their pocket. And if it is, they're the ones doing it wrong, not you.
yeah. And talk to your peers about money. Talk to your mentors about money. We need to get over this weirdness about talking about money.
In our
because
field, it's
really
huge
bad.
order. Yeah.
But the fact that so many of us don't talk about it allows bigger corporations to take advantage of us, frankly.
He's right. Write that one. I need
So we need to talk more about it.
Absolutely.
And Brandon, would you like to add to any of that about trying to get paid from something you're struggling with?
Yeah, I mean, early on in my career, like you said, Fernando, they fall off the face of the earth. Like, they just disappear. And I've sent managers, at that time I didn't have a lawyer, but I say, hey, my legal team is now getting involved in this. And all of a sudden, in 3 days, I now have a deposit in my account. So sometimes bluffing a little bit to get what you deserve, sometimes that may actually work, because they don't think, as crew members or engineers or whatever position you're in, they don't think you have a legal team. So when you double down on them, it's like, okay, now it's going to cost me more money to involve our legal team. Let me just resolve this issue. So if you have to send an email, after someone has ghosted you and say that, hey, my legal team is going to get involved with this now, let's see what happens. Maybe they do deposit the money the next day.
And I know this isn't going to apply to everybody, but if you do have a lawyer in the family,
Oh,
let me tell you, that is golden. I once was owed money from a previous employer that wouldn't pay up. It was a bonus payout. My mother called them because she's a lawyer. And she said to their in-house counsel, like, look, my son's going to sue you. I'm his lawyer. He has no legal expenses. You better just pay, because this is not going to end well. You're not going to outspend him. Because
I actually know someone that faked a lawyer letter, and it worked for them, and they sent it, and they signed a relative's name, Esquire, and it just seemed very official, and it was typed out, and it worked. It was,
Yeah, there you
that was the end of it right
So I know what I'm doing this evening when we're done.
that's a really good idea. I like that.
That's great. Okay, so do any of you actually advise people to take like a down payment? Or maybe get money after it's halfway completed or anything like that? Or do you wait until the end to get paid?
Yeah, good question. There's so many different ways to do that.
For me, so I own a rental company, and a lot of times, a lot of the shows that I'm doing, my company supports them as far as equipment. And so I have a show that I'm doing in June. I'm supposed to receive a deposit check this week, 50% of the rental costs, and I collect that for a couple different reasons. A, I want to know that they're serious about hiring us. But B, it also covers any other expenses that I incur trying to equip the show. So if there's a piece of equipment that I need to purchase or rent, that initial check covers all of those costs. If there's any other expenses that I'm going to incur, those deposits usually handle that. And then depending on the length of the show, if it's a week-long show, you can pay me the other 50% when we wrap. This show is going to be 5 weeks, so I'm probably going to issue 2 or 3 invoices so that I receive a couple checks as the production rolls along.
Yeah.
I was going to say, for me in live sound, getting a deposit doesn't exist. They're not going to give you a deposit for your day rate. But a new side venture that I've been doing with my company is for artists that are doing big performances. Like I was recently at the Grammys, and I was acting as the audio supervisor, and I was in charge of the whole project from the audio standpoint and interfacing between the artist's camp and the Grammys camp, and just making everything easy for the artist as it was his first performance at the Grammys. And I asked the tour manager, I said, is there any way they get a deposit for my work, the pre-work that I did? And I had done, at least 3 weeks worth of pre-work going into this. And they actually sent me my whole invoice, and I hadn't even started the work. And it kind of took me back for a second, because that was the first time that had ever happened in my career. But it showed how much our relationship meant to them that they trusted me with their sound. Yeah. So, I really think, there's a shift going on in the live industry and how, sound engineers and front of house engineers, get paid. And this whole contract or contracting, method of getting payment is something that's new. The industry is kind of still feeling it out, but it's something that you should at least try, ask for a deposit. Because your time, gigs cancel, they don't pay you, and you need a little something to live. You've set aside this time for them. So, yeah, a deposit it's amazing. I hope I get some more deposits.
We'll talk offline.
Yeah. Absolutely, I need some deposits.
So in terms of gigs canceling, I do a 48-hour cancellation fee. So if we're 48 hours from shooting and you cancel because the talent got sick or something happened, you're paying 50%. If the gig cancels in less than 24 hours, you're paying for the whole shabizzle.
Yeah.
Nice.
You should.
And that's all in my estimates.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, game audio equivalent of that. If the game gets canceled or doesn't ship, not my problem. You pay for the milestones worth of work I've done. The end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so are there any specific tools or resources that you could recommend for anything from tracking your finances to tracking your time for your work?
Yeah. I personally use QuickBooks.
Me too.
Yeah, I've been using it since I started my company 9 years ago, going on 10 years. And I'll be honest, it is a lot to learn. I'm not a trained accountant, but the software allows me to send invoices. It allows me to work on my invoices ahead of time and make them reoccurring, and they automatically send the invoice to the client, which, as someone who's on tour and loading in and loading out of a venue, I don't really necessarily have time to remember when this invoice is due. So on an off day, I'll just sit there and I'll write out all of my invoices for the tour or for for whatever project I'm on, and have the computer just automatically send it. It'll track, it pulls from my bank account when the money comes in, and all I have to do is just, hit accept, and it literally pulls the information for myself, or for itself. I was also able to give that to my accountant, and he is able to see my books, my profit loss, which I'll be honest, as the owner of my company and doing everything myself for the last 10 years, it was very tough to give that access to my accountant. But what I've learned is, you got to give some control away, especially to the professionals that are good at what they do, so that you can grow. And literally over the past 2 years, my company has grown exponentially. So QuickBooks for me has been a blessing, and that's just what I use. So.
Yeah, I use QuickBooks as well.
Mm-hmm.
You can track your mileage with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's got all the tools that you need. As far as accountants, they have what's called the accountant's copy that's kind of attached to your account. And so you can give access to your CPA, and they can go in and look at a more detailed version, basically, of QuickBooks to keep your books in order. In terms of taxes and stuff like that, if you get to a point where you're looking for a CPA or somebody to handle those things for you, make sure you're getting somebody that kind of has a teaching spirit. You want somebody that's going to be able to guide you. My CPA taught me how to use QuickBooks over several years, a little bit here, a little bit there, and now I've been in business for, I've been using the same CPA for probably 20 years, and I do almost everything in such a way to where she can bang out my books pretty quickly, and it's actually saving me a ton of money annually. Yeah. So look for somebody that has a teaching spirit so that they can educate you as to what things you can do to make your life easier, pay less taxes, streamline all of that.
As an alternative to QuickBooks, I'm not doing as much volume as these guys because most of my income is from a salary. I use an app called Wave. It's a web-based one. It's similar to QuickBooks, doesn't quite have the depth of features, but it's really cheap and simple to use. And I do a handful of freelance gigs a year, so it works great for that.
And there's a program called Quicken, too, that is owned by the same company that owns QuickBooks, and it's just kind of like a QuickBooks Lite. So if you're not doing a lot of that stuff or you're just getting your feet wet, that might be a better way to go. It's also free, I think.
Yeah, that's what I used in freelance was Quicken because it was simplified.
Do all of you have CPAs, and do you also have bookkeepers?
Probably. I did not have a CPA for the first few years that I did freelance work, and then I got one and realized that they saved way more money than they cost. I found a certified public accountant that was an elderly gentleman with a giant old wooden desk and messy paperwork everywhere, which made me nervous. He taught me and educated me about taxes and write-offs for my side company and my business, and managed to convince the government that every year I lost an awful lot of money. Made no profit of any kind. And at first it felt like a form of theft, and then I realized it's actually business, and it's what they don't teach us in school at all, and it's how entrepreneurs make money. We write off everything. Anybody here can tell you, if I go to the movies, it's entertainment research, that's media write-off. I've made jokes for real about mowing my own yard and its beautification of my studio residence property. That's a tax write-off. Everything is a form of a tax write-off, and you can get to where your tax burden drops significantly. Now, I pay a lot less taxes in my freelance than I do through my established W-2 salary, by far.
Wow.
Yeah.
I thought I had a good CPA. I think I need yours.
I don't know if the government would think you need a CPA.
One of the things that my CPA does that is really awesome is she checked out the statistics on how, what's the percentage of people that get audited that apply for extensions? And the number is dramatically low. So what we do is, while everybody is rushing to get their taxes done, I'm chillaxing. I'm not worrying about it. About a month after tax season, I'll send my CPA all of my information, and we do our taxes in October. And that has worked out beautifully for me because I am no longer stressed out about this looming tax date. Most of the time, I don't even think about it. And I don't even ask her what we're doing. It's just like, I haven't spoken to her at all this month. I just know that she's already applied for an extension, and we're just going to file in October.
That is really good info.
Yeah.
That's good to know, yeah.
But don't everybody do it, or else it's going to stop working.
I'm between CPAs currently, but yes, I normally have one. As far as who keeps the books, I do it myself, but I really enjoy tracking stuff. I'm weird. I don't hate spreadsheets, so.
Yeah. It used to be a lot harder in the old days because I actually had to have a shoebox of receipts and paper things that I would keep.
Yeah.
Now almost everything I buy is from one of 4 online portals that are where my budget goes, whether it's Sweetwater or Amazon, it's different stores. So each year I can just go there and print out everything that I know I paid for, and it's really easy to calculate those numbers.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have a CPA now, but early in my career, the first year, I didn't have a CPA. And I didn't really even know you had to pay taxes, because prior to that, I worked for Staples, and they took out the taxes. So that first year, I owed the government a nice chunk of change that I honestly didn't have.
Yeah. Yes.
And that was the learning lesson right then and there. And that literally course corrected my entire career and journey on taxes is very important. So I pay my taxes quarterly, which, it sucks that you got to put some money to the side. You may want to do something with it, but it helps at the end of the year for your return. And honestly, it helps me get an actual return as a freelancer on top of, like you said, your write-offs. So yeah, CPA, when you can afford it, definitely go for it. He or she will save you so much more money than they're worth. I mean, that they charge, so.
And like it or not, you will never defeat the IRS.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
It's not happening. Just pay them what
Many
you
have
have
tried.
to.
Yeah, so my last question here is, how do you ensure that you're setting aside enough money for your taxes and any other expenses you might need to set aside money early for?
I set aside 40% of everything that I make. 40.
4-0.
And the reason I do that is because some years I make a lot of money in 1099 income. Some years I do a lot of W-2 income. I never know until the end of the year which one of those incomes are going to be more. And so I've had some years where I owe a lot of money to the IRS because it's been mostly 1099 income. And yeah, I would rather save more money than I'm actually going to need, so that it's not a thing, right? I get the tax bill, I write the check, and I can still afford to take my wife to a nice dinner.
I do 35%. I'm a little lower than him because I live in Texas where there's no state income tax.
There's no state income tax in Nevada either.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just flying a little closer.
I always have a little bit left over. I try not to make it so that the balance is zero.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is, if we're talking early on in your career, I know for me, every penny that I made early in my career was immediately used on food or gas or just survival of a basic instinct. And I learned early on that you can unfortunately owe the IRS money, but if you file your extension and then set up a payment plan properly with them, it's a little to almost no interest payment plan. So even though you might owe several $1,000s or even more. I've been in the same trouble that Brandon mentioned in my first year. I got into a deep dive, and then you learn quickly. But you can. I generally keep now to where I'm paying last year's taxes, and I'm offset by a whole year, and the payments are actually low in terms of interest. And I only save about 15%, so that I'm like way below both of them. But because of tax deductions and things like that, generally it's somewhere between 10 and 15% that I end up paying on freelance money. So I know I've just got that covered by that number. But early on, don't worry too much about that. Those are amazing numbers, and I'm so proud of them. I've done that. In my early career, I didn't save a penny because there was no penny to save. You know, that'll happen as time goes on.
Another IRS pro tip: if you owe money, don't run. Like, I mean, don't run, but don't avoid them. Call them, because they will hit you with heavy interest rates if you don't engage with them.
Their penalties are not a joke.
Their penalties are insane, but if you talk with them, they will work with you.
Yeah, I would say prior to the pandemic in my career, I saved everything. I was fortunate to stay home with my parents when I was on the road, which was about 90% of the year. So I got to save a lot of that money. And I'll be honest with you all, it saved me when the pandemic came, because literally my my industry just disappeared immediately. And during the 2020, 2021, while I was out of work, I didn't receive one penny from any of those clients that I have on my credit list. All those big names, I received $0. And again, I spend 95% of my year away from my own family to be with my road family. So that money that I saved early on, being blessed to be home with my parents, and I had really low overhead. I had a car that I never drove, which, please, if you tour or if you're on the road a lot, don't waste your money on a car. I wish I didn't purchase that car. I would have saved even more money. But, save that money just in case for a rainy day. Yeah. Pandemic came out of nowhere, but I was somehow prepared, So I wish I had been taking that money and invested in more, but at the moment I learned from that, and now, we plan for the next whatever situation we have to go through. So save it up, as much as you can if you're blessed to be at home and have low overhead.
Yeah.
Well, I would just try as hard as you possibly can to keep your overhead as low as possible.
Yes.
Don't spend money that you don't need to be spending. Save everything that you possibly can.
It's such a huge one especially for people that do tech stuff. You want the gear. I want the next mic.
Don't spend the money. Don't spend the money. Save it.
If I don't have a current need for it or a way to make money on it, it's a want and not a need.
Yep.
You don't.
Big difference
You will
between a
not
want
get
and a
more
need.
clients because someone found out you have a cool piece of gear.
Yep.
I've never heard of that happening.
I've wasted so much money in my career on that. I turned that corner a few years back.
All right, thank you, everybody. We're going to open it up for a Q&A from our students here and everybody. Hi. Wait, I'm not supposed to moderate the Q&A, right?
We have time for 3 questions. We're going to go Nobody that spoke, how many do you?
No, wait, just a sec. I think she already has somebody queued up here.
He's up here.
Okay.
Oh. Hi, my name is Luis Sanchez. I am in film. Those who do not know history are bound to repeat it. I want to know some of the biggest mistakes y'all made that we should avoid. Not the ones y'all already said.
Biggest mistakes.
I think in the early part of my career, I can't tell you of a specific time, but I know that there were several times where I wasn't very clear as to what my rate was. There have been a couple times where I've worked with clients that I had a little bit of a history with, and it was like, hey, are you available to do this job? I love you, sure, I'm available, but then we never discussed the rate. And that can be kind of tricky because then, since we didn't have an agreement, I send them what I think would have been my rate, and it wasn't, and so that can cause a little bit of friction sometimes. So I would say anytime there's a job, as uncomfortable as it may be to talk about money, you need to lay those terms out immediately so that everybody is on the same page.
Yeah.
And we have an online question from Taima Smith, who's a graphic design student. Post-grad, what is a reasonable starting rate? And how many free or pro bono projects should we use or do in the beginning?
That's kind of very unique.
Yeah, that's a unique question, and it depends so much on your particular industry, which I don't know the rates there, so I can't really speak to them. But what I can say is what we said earlier is that doing free work should only happen if that free work has value to you. If I have clients, which I have clients now to the point where I don't have any free time, I can't take on anything unless you were to offer me enough more than I'm making that I would be willing to switch. But in the beginning, if you have no clients right now that are currently paying, then working on a project with somebody, you're not working on it for free. You're networking and collaborating and gaining experience. If you have a paying client, don't do free work at that time. Always be working. Always be working. Do not get off the work train. Everyone in this room should be involved currently in a project of your own that you think is of value, and the second it's over, you should be in another one. It never stops until eventually someone's paying you for those projects that you're working on. So don't be afraid to do free work, but don't think of it as free, like we said before. It reminds me of the thing when people say, and to your point with the question, fake it till you make it. How many people have heard that term, fake it till you make it?
I used to live by that. Yeah.
It's just a mentality that I'd like to maybe get you to think a little bit differently about, though, because you're not faking anything. Nobody's faking anything. You're an enthusiast, and being an enthusiast got you to school. You did that. That's an action. Graduating is an action. That took time and effort and work. You get out into an industry where people need your work. They're not doing you a favor. They need you to do this, and you've trained yourself to get to that point. So even though you're at the beginning and confidence is difficult to come by until you're really, really experienced, have confidence. You're not faking anything. You're exactly where you're supposed to be, and you're not there by accident. You put yourself there, and now you're talking to someone that needs you. Put your shoulders up and feel some confidence in that, because there's nothing for you to think. The person that's offering you the gig that you're negotiating with literally had their first day out of school, that they were in the exact same position, and they weren't faking it at the time either.
Quickly, actually, no, never mind. I was thinking of the last question. I was about to answer the previous question. That was really
about
dumb.
rates
I
and
agree.
free pro bono.
Yeah, again, I just want to mention the idea of don't work on it if somebody else is getting paid. Like, make sure of that. That is such a common thing.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to ask. This might sound completely
Yeah.
crazy, but not enough people
Ask
do.
them.
Don't be afraid to ask for a percentage. If you've got a project and you're making a game and you need sound and I need to network and work and you don't have any budget at all, okay, well, let's work together, network and experience. But you've got a project you're working on. What if we finish this and sell it on Steam? Write me 10% ownership of this and I'll do all of the sound for you. And if it goes well, we both make a lot of money. If it doesn't, it was just our time and our experience together. But sometimes people say, I don't have anything to give. Well, of course you do. You don't have cash in your pocket right now, but you have an IP, a product, something that you're planning on finishing and hopefully developing into money. Very, very few people ever bother to ask for that. They might say no, and then you can say, okay, well, you're not valuing my input to this, because we would be making money together in that case, and I'll put my time and effort into it. Don't be afraid to ask for percentages.
Or give discounts in exchange for points. I mean, and
Right.
a lot of them probably won't succeed, but if you get one or two wild successes, that works out well.
Hi, my name is Leo, for anyone that wants to network. I'm in the film department. But my question is, I know you mentioned, Fernando, that you have a lot of issues. Well, not a lot of issues, but
I do have a lot of issues.
I'm sorry. You have that issue with that client that went AWOL on you pretty much for your work. My question is for all of you, are there any key points or tactics that you can give us when differentiating between a reliable, trustworthy client, now that you guys have that experience, versus an unreliable one?
Yeah, you know, it's really interesting. If you just listen to your gut, you'd be surprised at what kind of dangers you can avoid. You know, every time I've done a job where I've had either a really horrible experience, I've had a couple clients that have bailed out on paying me, when I look back and reflect on those times, every single time, with the exception of Muse, who still owes me money, every single time I had a weird feeling about it. Like there was a point at some point where I'm like, is this going to be okay? And then the mistake that I've made every single time is I either wanted to work on the project, usually because I thought I was going to make a big paycheck behind it, or I had some people that I care about, some other technicians and mixers and stuff that were not busy at the moment, and I was really anxious to get them working. There have been a couple times where I've taken on some projects that I got burnt, and that was the only reason. I was like, I'm good, but I'd really like to get these other people working. But I'd get a squirrely feeling in my stomach, and I wouldn't listen to it.
Let's say you don't get that gut feeling. Everything seems to be smooth sailing, and then next thing you know, they go AWOL. Is there anything that you guys could advise?
So I've sent a couple clients to collections. Now, by the time I get there, I already know that they're not going to pay me. Okay, the way that collections works most of the time is you're basically writing 60% of whatever that debt is over to the collection agency, right? So any money that they retrieve, you get 40% of, right? So in my mind, I'm already not going to get paid. So if I get 40% of nothing, cool, I wasn't going to get anything anyway. But what it does do is it puts a really nasty stain on their credit. I've done this with a couple of individuals that owed me a lot of money, and I know for a fact that they suffered because of it. So I didn't get my money, but I got even.
Yeah.
Satisfaction.
I like it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. That's it? All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I really, really appreciate this. This was a fantastic panel. Thank you so
guys.
much for the information. And